I'm really happy to have TJ Winick with us. Some of our viewers may recognize the face, somebody who has been both a local and national journalist for a number of years. But how many years back you left the industry and started Essex Strategies?
That's right. So I was in journalism for nearly 20 years. First of all, it's great to be here.
Yes,
Thank you for having me. And so I was in local news, as you mentioned, in Florida and Pittsburgh, and then my hometown of Boston, and then was with ABC News for 6 years. But I got out in 2013 for reasons that are both professional and personal. I had a son and didn't feel like jumping on a plane at a moment's notice for breaking news. But I actually worked for a strategic and crisis communications firm in Boston for 10 years and then started my own firm, Essex Strategies, as you mentioned, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So out on your own, but given your time in journalism, both regionally and different places, but then nationally,
sure,
with ABC. And then, working in the industry, kind of crisis communications, strategic communications. Probably few people know both sides better than you.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that my previous career as a journalist is what informs my perspective now, right? I think that my bailiwick, my core competencies are both on the proactive side, which is public relations as people typically think about it, and then on the crisis and issues management side, you might think of it as proactive, right? Communications, positive, raising visibility, building reputation, and then on the crisis side, it's navigating reputational threats and thinking about whether that's internally with internal audiences like employees and board members, or externally with the public, with the press, with customers, patients, whatever business you're in.
And both are equally important, right? I think you nailed it on the head in working with lots of chamber member businesses and organizations. I think most business understands, look, my brand matters, our reputation, and we need to be doing something no matter what the resource level. If somebody's got more resources, they can maybe do more on platforms in terms of advertising, brand enhancement, et cetera. But even if it's a small business, just having a website, some social media presence is important to kind of letting the public customers know. But as you grow as a business and think about it a little bit more, the crisis side is important, right? A small business could be somebody who posts up on a bad review, which is completely untrue, which goes spirals out of all over social media, goes viral on social media. If it could be a larger company with crisis with an employee or an accusation against the company, you've got to think about, okay, what do we do in a situation like this?
Well, I know we'll get to the book, but the name of the book that I wrote is called Reputation Capital, and the idea behind it is,
hold it up, so
I would love that. So thank you. So there's human capital, right? There's financial capital, and there's reputation capital. And what you talked about is it's important to build that reputation capital before a crisis or an issue strikes, because past behavior builds expectations around what your future actions are going to be, right? And so if folks have a generally positive impression of your brand, of your nonprofit, your business, your college, whatever it is, then they're going to be more likely to believe your side of the story when the excrement hits the air conditioner, as they like to say.
Benefit of the doubt.
Right, exactly. And that pause when people hear negative news about your brand, it's important because everything that you've done to that point, you talked about proactive marketing, your website, earned media, which is public relations, which is an expert quote in the newspaper or in a business journal, right? That matters because third-party validation is so important, and that's why public relations is valuable, because when people read a newspaper, they think, oh, well, they could have talked to anybody in the industry, but they chose to speak to this one particular person. And so that builds reputation and that builds credibility.
Right. And then, in your graphic description of when excrement hits the fan, you work with companies, organizations,
sure,
institutions, so you're preparing for that. You're no one's going to know exactly what's going to happen or how it's going to break, but there are things people should be thinking about beforehand, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I like to say that half my clients want to be on the front page of the paper and the other half never want to be in the media at all because of some reputational threat they're facing. Unfortunately, on the crisis side, not enough organizations and institutions do the necessary work ahead of time. I think there are various studies out there, but some people say as many as 40% of it, organizations don't do crisis planning, may not have a crisis plan in place, but certainly I work with organizations and clients all along the crisis spectrum, from early on, those companies that have the foresight, maybe they want to build a crisis response plan, maybe they want to run tabletop exercises, maybe they want to do media trainings, all the way to folks who say, I have a camera, a television camera at my back door, what do I do?
Right.
And so it's those companies that plan, that maybe have a reservoir of language in place, template language that can be adapted for certain situations, or they have response protocols, or they have an emergency list of contacts. And so they have a plan when something goes sideways, they know exactly what to do, and that can be invaluable. It's actually, investing in crisis planning is obviously a form of insurance.
Right. And this is kind of a science and an art. You say response protocols, like when something hits the fan, people being taught and as a discipline, just don't, people shouldn't just be commenting until we understand the full ramifications of exactly what happened, how it happened, and then kind of have a coordinated response that's not creating things, right?
Right, and I think that in certain circumstances, it obviously depends on the crisis. Everyone is different, but if it's going to make news, let's say it's high profile, then the goal is to keep it to a one news cycle story. So many times when there have been crises over the past, let's say, 30, 40 years, people don't actually remember the crisis necessarily, but they remember the response.
Right.
So whether it's Tylenol's masterful response back in the 80s, or whether it's BP's response, a crisis that I covered down in the Gulf, folks remember the response, and that impacts your reputation too. Obviously, sometimes it can take a very long time to rebuild public trust and confidence when something goes wrong and you don't handle it the right way.
Right. So if people are interested in kind of having a conversation with you and the Essex Strategy team about engaging, thinking about this, talking about this, how do they do that?
Well, I would recommend, first of all, that they Google us or they search for us in their AI platform of choice, because fortunately we're the only Essex Strategies.
Okay, there you go.
Or they
That's
can go to www.essexstrategies.com.
Okay, and where can we, same place if they want to learn about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to any of their independent booksellers. They can go to Amazon, and it's readily available.
All right, probably would help them as they engage in a conversation with you.
I wrote it so that anyone from intern to CEO could understand it, could take hopefully some valuable lessons away.
Right, awesome. TJ Winick for being with us, and thank you for being with us on this edition of Chamber Exchange, the TV show, and our sponsors, Bank Hometown and St. Vincent.